Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. So, by chance, while I was flipping through our fantastic Kanopy streaming catalog, I noticed that one of my absolute all-time favorite Jim Henson films had been added to the roster of these movies that are available. On a whim, I decided, let's just see what else is on here that happens to be tied to Jim Henson, and I was so pleasantly surprised to see there's so much in the Kanopy catalog that has to do with Jim Henson. Whether we're talking about some of his classic films, whether we're talking about his legacy studio productions, like things that his children have since put together and released to the world, or we're talking about documentaries about Henson and puppetry and just the entire art that he kind of brought into mainstream today. So that's what I really wanted to focus on. A couple of the films that I grew up absolutely adoring, along with some quick little picks that I found in the catalog that I do think anyone who is interested in Jim Henson or who happens to have, warm, fuzzy feelings about the art of puppetry might be interested in. As always, these recommendations are available to you entirely for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. So without any further ado, let's get to the Jim Henson Rex. Okay, so first up is the pick that kind of spawned this whole Kanopy Henson offerings deep dive that I ended up doing, and that is 1986's Labyrinth. So this movie came out when I was 4. I'm pretty sure I watched it then and have watched it essentially every year since. For those who are not familiar with Labyrinth, 1, why? And 2, Labyrinth stars Jennifer Connelly as a young teen who feels very much trapped in a situation with a wicked stepmother where she is very much put upon. She feels as though she is being forced to take care of her new half-sibling. And, it's very quickly in the film, we are introduced to a whole lot of teen angst that ends up culminating in this fantastical deal that she makes with the Goblin King, who of course miraculously shows up at her home one dark and stormy night. And the deal she ends up making with him, unbeknownst to her, is that she will have freedom and the life that she wants, but she ends up giving up her little brother to the Goblin King, and this ends up giving her reason to travel to the Goblin Kingdom and then quest to save her little brother. And of course, along the way, she discovers loads more about herself and how much she cares for her brother, but just in general is a lovely opportunity for lots of interactions with incredible puppets and also some fantastic songs. The Goblin King, I should mention, is named Jareth and is played by the incomparable David Bowie, who absolutely makes this film. So if you are a David Bowie fan at all, you absolutely have to see this if you've never seen it before. There's some really, really fantastic musical scenes within this. He is the Goblin King. I'm always intrigued when people talk about how much they want a sequel. One, I do think it'd be interesting to see more about this world that Henson builds, but I just don't think it would be the same with somebody else playing the Goblin King. I just can't even imagine. So the production values are just so good. Like, I love the costuming. There are some really beautiful set pieces, like some really, really ridiculously cool pieces where they've built this whole other fantasy world. The puppets themselves are incredible. I mean, these are classic Henson puppets. The music is amazing. And the way that they incorporate the music within the story is really quite well done as well. For those who are really anti-musical, because I have tons of friends who really just hate musicals, I do think this is less stop telling the story, start singing a song, and more organic than that. It definitely does have, you know, a really good vibe when it comes to how that sort of mystical fantasy realm blends into the musical numbers. And then puppets, I do think there's just something different. Like, they just make everything that would be weird or odd make sense. So yeah, it's a puppet that's singing. Why wouldn't a puppet be singing? It's not like, your standard everyday Joe is just walking along the street and then bursts into song. It's a puppet. Puppets sing. Why wouldn't they? And I don't know why, and I don't know if that's like one, I do enjoy a good musical to begin with, but I also just really love Jim Henson, and I always have. Obviously, I've been watching since I was a very young child. But there's just something I think that works about this movie, whether, we were talking about the 80s or we're talking about today in the 2020s, which is crazy to me how this film has aged really well. It does not, to me, feel dated. That whole concept of like teen angst and, the challenges that come with, blended families and all of that. And then pulling that into sort of from a contemporary world to a fantastical world. I think it's just one story that kind of like is universal, that will still feel prescient and timely no matter what. And who doesn't want that to be, guided by David Bowie? I mean, for real. The Jareth character design and just overall look is so good. By the way, I didn't even talk about his character when we were talking about costuming, but everything from like, they have very clearly kind of leaned into the whole glam rock element of Bowie's persona to begin with. But even though that is not the way that I would imagine a Goblin King, certainly from other big authors' realms to be, it totally works for here. You understand why Connolly would be essentially seduced by this, by like all of the things that he's saying, because the character is super alluring. It's not like some decrepit, wretched looking being. This Goblin King is attractive and is appealing, and it just is a very different take on things than you would necessarily come to assume when you hear the term Goblin King. Anyway, if you are a fan of fantasy stories, if you are a fan of Jim Henson, if you love the 80s, if you just want that hit of nostalgia, make sure you check out Labyrinth. I'm so happy that it's on there because it definitely didn't used to be. As always, this one is totally free and 100% a big must watch on my list. Okay, my other big pick for this week is The Dark Crystal, which came out in 1982. This is just this gorgeous fantasy epic that's entirely puppetry focused. It is glorious. If you love a good epic tale, man, this one is it. You have really terrifying like forces of evil. Like, the puppetry design is immaculate. I do remember being very creeped out by a number of like the darker characters in this, just because they look so evil. I mean, like, it's really amazing what you can do with puppetry. It really is. The way that they move, the way that they kind of lurch around, but then the way they've taken these bits of fabric and foam and metal work and made them into these very real beings is just absolutely amazing to me. And the artistry that goes with that, being able to create these characters, I don't know if we think about how much goes into performing when you are limited to the features that can be adjusted and that can move in a puppet's face. It's not like the human face where everything moves, right? You have only the mechanics that your puppet is capable of doing in order to show all of these things. And some of these characters, man, they run the gamut of emotions, even though you're dealing with those limitations. So it's really reliant on the puppeteers knowing their craft, but also being able to evoke all of those emotions with the voice. It is an outlandish amount of work to show how much artistry goes into this. So of course you've got the evil forces, but you've also got these sweet gelflings that we follow in order to sort of follow their quest along this storyline. There are these sweet, innocent creatures that need to go on a quest in order to fulfill this ancient prophecy. And as they travel along, they meet these allies, but also plenty of other creatures that want to impede this adventure. It is absolutely stunning. They did on Netflix make a newer version of this, but 100%, I do think that the original film is far superior. Maybe that's nostalgia talking. I do think that there's some amazing things about the series, so I do recommend you check it out if you do have access to Netflix. But man, the original classic film is just something else. The musical score is stunning. You do have fantastic performances. You've got Stephen Garlick playing your main Gelfling, along with all of the actors who perform all of the characters being absolutely astonishing. And then, as I mentioned, the puppetry itself is just so gorgeous. So if you are interested in, some really classic Jim Henson storytelling, some really incredible puppetry, beautiful scores, beautiful sets, make sure you check out 1982's The Dark Crystal. It is absolutely gorgeous and totally worth the watch. Okay, I mentioned earlier, beyond the basic Jim Henson specific productions, there are a ton of legacy projects as well, products that were put forth by the Jim Henson Company after he passed on. One of my favorites of which is 2004's Mirrormask. Brian Henson, Jim's son, was really the driving force behind this, and it is a phenomenal film. It relies primarily on a lot of CGI and visual effects. There's not puppetry like in this the way that there is in the other two recommendations I made, but it definitely leans into that kind of storytelling because you've got a real world element that eventually transfers into this fantastical world where all of the inhabitants, the more humanoid inhabitants anyway, are masked. So you always have these sort of feature impeding devices, and a lot of the performance is then based on movement and voice. So there are a lot of things puppetry wise that this story leans into that aren't actively puppetry. It's also just a visually stunning film, like especially once it transfers into this sort of fantasy realm where you've got a lot of characters that are done with CGI, and then you have all of the CGI elements in general, which is like essentially it's the entire universe that we're in there is like a CGI green screen kind of situation. Absolutely stunning looking. Similar to Labyrinth, we have a young girl who is having difficulties in the real world and then is transferred into this more fantastical realm. So you do have those elements that tie the two things together. But I do really love that one. So if you're interested in one of the legacy productions that is a little less traditional, at least a little less traditional Jim Henson style, but still has a lot of the same spirit and is still under that big production Henson Company title, check out 2004's Mirrormask. Definite must watch. One of the other quick little recommendations I wanted to offer up is another kind of legacy production called Fantastic New Worlds. Heather Henson presents this little collection of very short films, each one of which takes you on a fantastic journey through the art of real-time puppetry. I believe there are 8 individual short films in there, and they all go really quickly, but they're all really well done. It's quite the amazing curated collection of stories. And it's just an interesting way to look at the art of puppetry. Again, under this sort of cozy umbrella of the Henson Company. None of these are Henson shows or storylines, but, I think the idea is with Heather Henson presenting these tales, it's like, this is the next generation, and I really loved that about this. So this 2020s little collection definitely is a great way to sort of see where we're going with the whole art form. As I mentioned, all of these are just very quick, very short stories, so it's not a big time commitment. You can watch a couple here and there, but I definitely would recommend this, especially if you are interested in the art form, just because some of these tales just go in such a different direction from things that I've seen in the past. So that was really, really exciting to watch. So again, Fantastic New Worlds, just a quick little rec because it is really, really fascinating to see. Okay, so those were my recommendations for my Jim Henson week. If you have any titles that you would like to share and recommend to others, please pop those in the comments. Or if you have any recommendations for themes that you'd like to see us cover throughout the rest of the year, definitely share those. Always looking for help with that. As always, thank you so, so much for joining me. This week was a delightful little deep dive into puppetry that I have not had the chance to do in a while. So this was a really fun week for me. Again, thanks so much for joining, and hopefully I will see you next week.